And hey, you may have noticed, well, it was a bit of a blur really, because Monday, not only the first day of April, April Fool's Day, the first day of the financial year, but it was also, everyone had a day off, and we were all in holiday mode really. But the 1st of April was also the financial year rollover, and a whole bunch of new policies kicked in, including more money for some at least, although not a lot. Not much of a lolly scramble, perhaps. Joining me on the program now, political commentator Dr. Bryce Edwards. Well, honestly, not many lollies in the jar this year round, Bryce.
Yes, the joke's on us, I guess. There's always a danger with governments starting new programs on the 1st of April that people make these April Fool's jokes. But yes, as you mentioned, it is the start of the financial year.
Yeah.
And so it is an appropriate time for these things to kick in. And this year's ones, they aren't terribly controversial.
Yeah.
I don't think they're, it's not a big amount of money being spent or given out in lollies, you're right. But it just keeps on adding to the government this idea of getting things done and rolling things out. And that's what I think Christopher Luxon is very, very keen to do. Just show solid progress and show things ticking over and get a sense, to the public that this government knows what it's doing. It's achieving things. And he's trying to compare that with the last government, with this perception that they just didn't know what they're doing. They didn't measure what they wanted to achieve, and hence they didn't actually get it done. So we've now had that first 100 days. It's a useful mechanism. It comes from really US politics, and it's kind of a long-term tradition of US presidents to have a plan for their first 100 days.
Yep.
And we're starting to see it here, and you could say it's a gimmick, but it is a useful way of packaging some of these reforms into a short piece of time.
There's one thing which, in my memory at least, is new. Yeah, first 100 days, I think that goes back to Roosevelt in the States. Yeah. But having a second 100 days, now that, to be fair, most of the first 100 days was undoing previous government's policies, the low-hanging fruit, as it were. But to set a second 100 days, to set quite a robust, a rigorous program of reform and change, bringing in their new policies, not just reforming the old ones, the second 100 might be a lot tougher than the first, Bryce.
It might well be, and just the whole concept of having another 100 days, and so we've got a 36-point plan to go over the next quarter of the government's business, and it's already getting a lot of criticism and sort of parallels drawn with corporations, businesses that also have quarterly plans, and I guess the government's opponents are sort of bashing over the head, saying, "Well, this just shows that Luxon is a CEO, Prime Minister, and he's bringing in business ideas." But I don't think that's going to be unpopular with the public. Again, as I just mentioned, this idea of getting things done is something that Luxon and National really want to keep pushing. And so, yes, there's a quarterly 36 points, and some of them are a bit lame, some of them are a bit weak, but they just get across this idea that this government is focused on actually achieving things, and it gives a sense of, for people like you and I to be able to sort of tick things off and be able to judge them against what they said they're going to do.
Yep.
So overall, I actually think it's a very good idea, and I think it's going to be popular. There's some weaknesses in there, but that's just politics.
And hey, maybe Chloe Swarbrick's comments that, oh gosh, government isn't a corporation and the Prime Minister isn't a CEO, maybe that's a backfired, where it was people saying, hey, actually, we want to have somebody with a plan. We want to have somebody who we can measure their progress. We want some KPIs for our government. Yeah,
I guess I'll be more interested when Chloe Swarbrick actually goes through those 36 points and tells us what's good or bad about them, rather than this idea of having a quarterly plan. What she says will play to her base. And yes, there are some people that are still suspicious about Luxon's background as a CEO. But no, I don't think it's going to be bringing more people to the Greens or to Labor when they focus on this one.
Now,
perhaps when they focus on some of the actual policies in that 36 plan, sure.
Yeah, now we won't be able to get through all 36 points, of course, but I suppose the big one in amongst this, and everything sort of flows from the hub of the budget. That will be happening during this quarter. That will decide what gets funding, what doesn't, and what the government's priorities are. You're still a little bit secretive about what the details are, but we can perhaps get a clearer picture of priorities from this 36-point plan.
Yeah, look, I haven't looked at the plan with that lens, but I guess you're right. I mean, governments are always trying to do a mix between giving out some of the lollies in the lead up to the budget and trying to stretch out as much as the good news as they can from the budget, and then keeping some real big surprises for budget day. But I'm not sure there was anything in that 36 plan that was really that surprising.
Yeah,
it all seemed sensible from a National Party point of view at least, and it reiterated just that the government's going to have a lot of trouble delivering a austerity budget, or one that really does cut back on public service numbers, and no, it won't achieve us getting back into budget surplus, but it will deliver some sort of tax relief. Tax relief
is the all-important one on this. Even if they have to pare back the public service to the bone, we're all going to get tax cuts. Well, some of us are going to get more than others, perhaps.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. I mean, the details still to flow on that one. The other area which I thought was interesting, this is perhaps the more controversial aspect of the coalition government, is in the law and order area. The three strikes laws, that's on the list. Bringing in boot camps, the first of those will roll out within the next 100 days. I'm not sure I haven't met a lot of people within the justice sector that think that either of these policies are a good idea. However, this is what they campaigned on. This is part of the plan, right?
Yeah, I guess I fall into that category of thinking I'm very unconvinced by both of those policies, and I can see that the harm they might do. But yeah, I think there is a mandate for them, and the electorate really wants to see some strong things done in justice and law and order.
Yeah.
And I think they will be popular. I mean, the three strikes law, it's been there before. It's not untested. So yes, it's controversial, and it's going to produce a lot of, I guess, unhappiness from the more liberal sort of sphere of New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I think these will be, well, like I said, they're not surprising, and they play to the base of the government.
Exactly. Well. And hey, one of the some of the comments that are coming through on this is on the fact that it's not untested. We've had this before, and we've seen the difference that it makes. Not so much, as it turns out, when it comes to law and order and safer communities. Something that I wanted to look at in particular, though, is I think he's Associate Education Minister David Seymour, his truancy crackdown and fining parents for children's non-attendance at school. Again, a little bit short on details on this one. But what's your thoughts on that, Bryce, initially?
Yeah, so part of the 36-point plan is to come up with an attendance, I forget the term actually, attendance plan, basically.
Yeah.
And I also think this is one that will really resonate with people, and it does actually focus on something that is a bit wrong at the moment, and it's something that's happening throughout the world after especially COVID, that attendance has been going down in our schools, and I think New Zealand has probably been at the forefront of that. So, this is a real problem, and there'll be no one in schools that will suggest there isn't a need to deal with truancy at the moment.
Yeah.
It's just a question of how. And of course, it's a new idea to start giving schools the power to actually, implement fines and deliberately fine parents, and that will be controversial. I suspect it may not even really come about. I mean, at the moment, schools do have the ability, I believe, to fine, but they have to go through the police, and it has to be a big procedure. So Seymour's trying to find a way that there'll be truancy officers that will be able to hand out those fines. But of course, people also know, and I think Seymour knows this, you can't just find your way out of poor people sending their kids to school. And so he has responded to that critique already, saying, no, I'll only find the more wealthy people.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it makes a bit of a mockery of it all to me. If you're suddenly having to work out whether you can afford it or not to pay these fines,
Because honestly, if that was
I think it's right.
if that was a get out clause for paying my parking fines, I can't afford any of them, Bryce. Honestly, that's not a great way of doing justice, right?
Look, funny enough, in some countries they do have progressive rates for fines, and so for speeding fines, I think this is in some Scandinavian countries.
Yep.
You do pay a proportion of your annual income, like it might be 0.01% as your fine, and the richer you are, the more you pay. So I guess there could be something in that, but I doubt that David Seymour was going to be creating experimental reforms in that way in New Zealand. No,
it seems to lack the why. I think everybody's up in arms about the attendance levels, particularly at secondary schools. But what is the causal factor behind that, rather than just blaming the parents? And it'd be interesting to see whether or not it is those parents that take their kids out of school for a skiing holiday, or perhaps to go to the Northern Hemisphere outside of school holiday time, whether those parents who obviously can afford the fines will be fined, or whether it's going to be people with less means who are caught in the cracks. Again, as you say, if this policy is even enacted, we don't have details. We just have a promise to investigate, which may lead nowhere, actually.
Yeah, so everyone can agree it's a good idea, I think, to actually have some focus on fixing that truancy problem. David Seymour is the master of making those things quite polarising. Yeah. So yes, I won't be surprised if really this is something that gets him in the headlines, but we don't really ever see some actual real fines being delivered out. Yeah. And yeah, it will have its supporters. It will, in some ways, keep David Seymour, more in the news than the Prime Minister.
Job done in that case, perhaps from David Seymour's point of view. Well, Bryce, appreciate your comments. Wellington on a good day, another glorious day in our capital. Thanks very much for joining us on the program today.
Okay, thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.